Ani, Bojo, Kwe, Sego, everyone who has joined us today. Before we get started, I'm just going to note that we do have interpretation available. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a globe, and we have interpretation available from English to Spanish and Spanish to English. And we also have closed captioning and subtitles available as well at the bottom of your screen. Just note that those subtitles are auto-generated and they don't easily pick up Indigenous names, places, or Spanish. And I will just ask Professor Leticia Neria to convey these instructions in Spanish as well. Gracias.
Bienvenidas, bienvenidos. Queremos recordarles que contamos con traducción simultánea en caso de que lo requieran. La forma de activarlo es, encontrarán del lado derecho un pequeño globo que dice interpretación. Tenemos traducción del inglés al español y del español al inglés. También tenemos subtítulos que pueden activar. Los subtítulos son solamente para los angloparlantes y son generados automáticamente, por lo cual algunos nombres, algunas palabras no necesariamente van a ser exactos. Muchas gracias por su presencia el día de hoy.
Gracias, Leticia, and welcome everyone to the International Indigenous Student Knowledge Fair, which features the group projects of Indigenous students from 6 countries, Mexico, Ecuador, the Philippines, Costa Rica, Australia, and Canada, who took part in this 13-week International Indigenous Student Exchange Program. I will begin by introducing myself. My name is Brianna Berry. I'm an Indigenous woman of Genge-Gahaga, Omama Wanini, and Celtic Euro-settler heritage. I am a co-instructor for the International Indigenous Student Exchange Program. And when I first joined this program, it was in my former role as an Indigenous recruitment officer with the Center for Indigenous Student Services at York University. I hold a bilingual international Bachelor of Arts in Sociology and Gender and Women's Studies from the Glennon campus of York University. And my knowledge and interests lie in Indigenous rights, activism, resurgence, and knowledge systems. And I am very passionate about the inclusion of Indigenous ways of knowing and being in academic spaces, which has brought me to this program. Tonight, I will also be co-hosting with the academic lead of the program, Professor Carolyn Petrujny. And before Carolyn introduces herself, I will also just shout out some wonderful individuals who have made the program very successful and who have contributed to making the Knowledge Fair happen this evening. So I will mention Helen Balderrama, the Associate Director of International Partnerships and Programs at York International, Marie Rose Talla, Global Learning Coordinator at York International, and Jessie Thistle, who is an Assistant Professor in the Indigenous Studies program. I also want to mention that I have some tobacco here with me as well for everyone who will be sharing their knowledge this evening as a gesture of deep gratitude. And I will also light a smudge so that we may begin in a good way and really be in a good mindset for the Knowledge Fair. And for folks who are not from Turtle Island in what is now referred to as North America, there are many Indigenous nations here who smudge to begin events in a good way and to clear their mind and their energy for different events and ceremonies. And so while I light the smudge for everyone in the room, I will pass it over to Carolyn to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Brianna. Annie, Bojo, Kwe, Shekon to everybody who's here. My name is Carolyn Pedruchny, and I have the very good fortune of being the academic lead for this International Indigenous Exchange. So I'm a settler scholar whose grandparents and great-grandparents originally came from Ukraine and Poland, and they moved to the Canadian prairies and secured land to farm under the Dominion Lands Act. And this was on land that was taken from Anishinaabe people. So I grew up in a small town north of Winnipeg on land that was taken from the Peguis Band of Anishinaabe. I'm currently a professor in the history department at York University in Toronto on land that was taken from the Mississauga of the Credit River First Nation. So I'm continuously working on being an ally to Indigenous people to reconcile the privileges that I've been afforded through the dispossession of Anishinaabe and other Indigenous people. And I want to humbly offer tobacco to everyone that's here, all of the panelists, all of the commentators, all of the attendees. So tobacco is offered for people who are sharing their knowledge and wisdom. And I welcome you to, with an open heart and an open mind, to tonight's proceedings, where we're going to hear the fruits of the labor of the students who work together on their student projects. And I'll just turn it back over to Brianna for a moment.
We will also go over a few housekeeping items for this evening's event. So just to note that this event is being recorded, and we will share the recording with participants on our website promptly. We encourage all attendees to ask your questions about the student presentations through the Q&A button, but there's also an option to share your comments on the presentations through the chat function as well. And that is accessible to all attendees as well as presenters and panelists. And there will be time at the end specifically, there will be a larger Q&A where those questions can be addressed. We do have English and Spanish live interpretation, as mentioned, which is available through the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. And then English closed captioning is available at the closed captions button at the bottom of your screen. Also, just to preface this event with a content warning and noting that these presentations may include sensitive content, including but not limited to physical violence, race-based violence, discrimination, and personal experiences of colonialism. Please listen to the speakers respectfully and do not question their lived experiences. We do encourage you to take self-care measures if you become aware of any feelings of distress, and to reach out to your support network. And we also have created a list of resources for Indigenous attendees and presenters that we will paste in the chat, and you can access these resources. They are specific to York and a Canadian context in particular. But if you need anything, please reach out, either use these resources or reach out to your support network if you're feeling any distress. And on that note, we will begin the knowledge fair with a land acknowledgement, acknowledging the continuous presence of the Indigenous nations that the territory that York University is on. And I will pass that over to Carolyn.
Thank you so much, Brianna Miigwech. So it's conventional within Canada for settlers to give a land acknowledgement. And we have a standard land acknowledgement for our university, which I'll go through with you. But one of the things I want you to think about is that we're in a virtual environment. Everybody is inhabiting different land all over the world. All of that land at some point in some way or another was stewarded by Indigenous people in the past, in the recent past, in the long past, in the distant past. And also that land has to be stewarded by all of us in the future. So I want to call back to remembering ancestors. I want to call forward to think about descendants, and especially at this time of climate emergency and grave environmental danger. This is a time in which we need to be especially thoughtful and careful about land, and thinking about land as the most important member of all of our communities. So many Indigenous nations have longstanding relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located, and all of these precede the establishment of York University in the post-war period. So York acknowledges the presence, its presence on the traditional territory of many different Indigenous nations. These include Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. Today, Toronto, or Takaronto as it's known, is home to many different First Nations, also Inuit and Métis communities. The current treaty holders are the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, and this territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which is an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region.
Miigwech, Carolyn, and I would also like to briefly share with you a reflection on the land acknowledgement and the spirit behind its crafting. And this program has certainly influenced that reflection in many ways. And I've had the great honor to listen to the many wonderful ways in which different Indigenous students acknowledge the relationships to the territory on which their Indigenous communities reside and all the animate forces and beings therein, as well as what home means to each student. And it's become very clear that home exists in relation to all of your relationships. And it has led me to think about what's said and what's left unsaid when the land acknowledgement is given in an institutional setting, and the intentions within and the intentions yet to be realized. And so I'll speak a little bit about that now. So when read from a colonial point of view, the land acknowledgement may be read as a mere assertion of land ownership, which is an impoverished interpretation of its true spirit and an interpretation through a foreign lens. While the land acknowledgement serves as an assertion of claim to territory and the sovereignty and self-determination of Indigenous nations here in Turtle Island specifically, it is also a vindication of Indigenous peoples' deeply rooted ancestral and continuous relationships to the lands and all beings, relationships that have been thousands of years in the making. Our diverse knowledges, our realities, our political and social views, customs and norms all come from a situated place of embodied interrelation. And I feel like it's this relational aspect, an emphasis on creating meaningful, respectful, and reciprocal relations that's left unacknowledged in a literal reading of the land acknowledgement. So while you are acknowledging the Indigenous peoples on the land in which you reside, wherever you are tuning in from tonight, I also encourage you to consider your relationships to these people and to go about maintaining those relationships or establishing them in mutually respectful and reciprocal ways. And on that note, we will receive some greetings from senior leaders, and I will pass it off to Carolyn to introduce Miigwech.
So I'm so delighted that our program has been incredibly warmly supported by a lot of different communities and constituencies within the university. And I'm delighted to say that we've got some representatives from those constituencies here to welcome you all here today. Let's start with Sean Hillier, who is the chair of Indigenous Council at York. I'll just introduce Sean while you turn on your camera. So Sean Hillier is a queer Mi'kmaq scholar from the Qualipu First Nation. He's an assistant professor in the School of Health Policy and Management, and also a special advisor to the Dean on Indigenous Resurgence in the Faculty of Health at York. He is the chair of the Indigenous Council, as I just mentioned. He's also the co-chair of the Working Group on Anti-Black and Anti-Indigenous Racism in the Faculty of Health. And additionally, Sean is a board member of the AIDS Committee of Toronto, or ACT. So Sean, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you for that. And thank you for that amazing opening, Carolyn and Brianna, the offering of tobacco and the ability to do a smudge and do those things virtually is something that I appreciate, and I know many around this conversation will also appreciate. So Kwe Ani Tenzi, as I was introduced, my name is Sean Hillier. I'm a member of the Mi'kmaq Nation and a registered band member of the Halapu First Nation. And so with that, I come to York with a number of different positions and titles as we're just read off. And I'm very ecstatic to bring warm greetings to all of you today on behalf of my Indigenous colleagues, but also the Indigenous Council here at York University. I am delighted to be with you for this evening as part of the, sorry, I'm just at the airport, so you're hearing a background about to fly home. So I'm delighted to be with all of you this evening as a part of the International Indigenous Student Exchange Program. I welcome colleagues, students, and guests from Australia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Mexico, and the Philippines to this virtual event, where we will share and where we will learn from one another. Again, we are hosting this event from the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabe Nation. And I also acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. I had this already in my speech, and so I think it speaks to the importance that we just heard, that this will, I think, continue to play out as we go through our meeting today, but really situating ourselves within the territory and recognizing where we are is so foundational to a part of the reconciliation process that we are undergoing. I want to thank Carolyn, Brianna, Jesse, and others who have worked so hard in making this program work, and such a great success. And I really want to thank Carolyn in particular, who approached the Indigenous Council a number of years ago to work collaboratively with us as she developed and worked towards this amazing opportunity for all of you. So I look forward to your presentations and speaking with each of you. And I am excited to learn and to hear all that you have to share with us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. That's wonderful. Now let's turn to Professor Susan Dion. Susan, if you want to turn on your camera. She holds the inaugural role of Associate Vice President Indigenous Initiatives, which is brand new at York and actually effective September 1st of 2021. She is a Lenape and Potawatomi scholar with mixed Irish and French ancestry, and was the first Indigenous tenure track faculty member to be hired in the Faculty of Education at York. So Professor Dion joined York in 2001, and she was appointed to the rank of full professor in the year 2021. Congratulations. And she was a founding member of York's Aboriginal Education Council, which is presently York's Indigenous Council. And she served as co-chair for 3 terms between 2004 and 2015. And in 2014, Professor Dion served as the first academic director for the Center of Aboriginal Student Services, currently renamed as the Center for Indigenous Student Services. So Professor Dion, Susan, welcome.
Oh, Anashik, it's really nice to be here. Nialongomati, Quinganawalomwa, Nijishinzi, Sheshkohalawas Dion. Nan Jiai Nahi Wak Toronto, Ni de Lenapewe Potwatome, Niha Nish Minito, Anashik. I just wanted to put some of my Lenape words out into the universe. And in my introduction, I say Sheshkohalawas, meaning teacher. And my first role in my professional life was teacher. So I'm just so really thrilled for the invitation to be here, and I'm so excited to learn more about this program, and happy to bring greetings from the Division of Equity, People, and Culture, where the Associate Vice President Indigenous Initiatives role is situated in that division. So I bring greetings from Vice President of Equity, People, and Culture. So, you know, as I was preparing to give some opening remarks, giving opening remarks is kind of some ways a kind of a strange role. I experienced that way anyways. But yeah, I went to the website and I was reading some of the comments from the students, and I was just so excited and overwhelmed by what I learned from your words. Sharing Indigenous perspectives across Indigenous worlds. Another student wrote a whole world perspective on indigeneity and the chance to exchange experiences with Indigenous communities globally. It seems to me that the success of this program really comes from the energy and the knowledge and that all of the students bring to this program. So I was really impressed by your serious engagement and thoughtful responses to the learning opportunities that you clearly shared as a part of this program. I loved the energy and commitment, and I really, you know, was so really made me think about the York University academic plan and the ways in which this program advances global engagement, working in partnership, living well together. And then I was just like, well, really it touches on all the goals that the university has set for itself. So I really yeah, I think that what you're doing here is amazing. And I want to extend warmest congratulations to all of you and best wishes for a wonderful knowledge fair. And just keeping in mind that we're on Zoom and dependent on technology, I hope for you no power outages and no tech challenges. So I hope you have a wonderful knowledge fair, and I look forward to hearing some of your presentations. Anna Sheik.
Thank you so much, Chi Miigwech, Susan. That's wonderful. And especially wishing us no power outages. I know that we have quite a few people from the Philippines as panelists and in the audience, I see. And our typhoon hit there last night. So anyway, I hope everyone's okay. So I'm going to introduce our final outside speaker, who's actually the president of our university. But before I do, I just want to give a quick shout out to our provost who's here, Lisa Phillips. Both Lisa and our president, Rhonda Linton, have been longtime supporters of this program. Oh, good. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Sue. Hi, Rhonda. And so we're delighted that they're both here. I'm going to introduce Rhonda, who's going to say a few words. And just to, once again, we're so grateful for your support. So Rhonda Linton became York University's 8th president and vice chancellor on July 1st, 2017. And she is a director on the board of Universities Canada. So she joined York University in 2002 as Dean of the Atkinson Faculty of Liberal Arts and Professional Studies, where she oversaw substantial enrollment and program diversification, as well as expanded experiential education and community-based learning, which is exactly what we're doing here. And she went on to serve as York's inaugural vice provost academic from 2009 to 2012, and then as the university's vice president academic and provost from 2012 until 2017. So she's a dedicated proponent of community engagement and innovative partnerships. And she played an instrumental role in the creation of the York University TD Community Engagement Center and in expanding York's institutional collaborations with other post-secondary education partners. So welcome, Rhonda.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Bonjour, bonjour. And Brianna and Carolyn, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. You know, it's a really great pleasure to be able to welcome everyone joining us from across Canada and around the world for the International Indigenous Student Exchange Knowledge Fair. I think it's so appropriate and it's just so great that we're doing this at York University, because the university from its inception in its mission statement had a commitment to social justice and to access, to making sure that no talent was left behind, and making sure that all students have an opportunity to study and have access to a high quality learning experience at a research intensive university committed to driving positive change. And as part of that overarching vision, we are committed to advancing Indigenous epistemologies, scholarship, knowledge translation, and action that will move us towards awareness, reconciliation, and decolonization of our systems and our practices. Increasing our collective understanding is one step that we can all take to contribute to this work. And I am grateful to the presenters that are here today for their willingness to share their experiences, their thoughts, and reflections on subjects ranging from Indigenous languages to the healing power of music, to the impact of social media on Indigenous identity. York University sees the International Indigenous Student Exchange Program as an important opportunity for our students and their peers in Australia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Mexico, and the Philippines to engage in knowledge sharing, critical dialogues, and collaboration on topics such as Indigenous knowledge and histories, language and cultures, the land, gender, disrupting colonial spaces, and re-indigenization, spirituality, and current issues that Indigenous students and communities face both locally and globally. And we hope that the International Indigenous Student Exchange Knowledge Fair will provide a welcoming forum for students to share their local histories, knowledge, cultural practices, languages, and rituals. I want to thank the York University faculties, the facilitators, and the staff, and of course, our international partners who have supported the program. In particular, I want to extend my warm gratitude to Professor Carolyn Produchny and co-instructors and co-facilitators, Brianna, Barry, and Jessie Thistle, for championing this program and creating a safe space for exploring global indigeneity. I look forward to supporting the future iterations of the International Indigenous Student Exchange Program and to listening and learning from today's presenters. Thank you so much. Merci, miigwech.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. We really appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Brianna now, and we're going to get right down to it.
Miigwech, Carolyn, and miigwech to all of our speakers for your reflections, for your greetings, and your continuous support of the program. It's a program that takes a collective effort, for sure. Without further ado, we'll begin with our first student presentation. It will be a brochure on the impact of social media on Indigenous identity. In this group, we have, well, they actually introduced themselves in the video, but I'll briefly introduce them here as well. We have Jordan Pillay. He belongs to the Iboloy ethno-linguistic group from Sablan, Benguet, Philippines, and he is taking his Bachelor of Science in Mathematics at the University of the Philippines, Baguio. I'll invite you all to come on screen as well. We have Linton Akiwenzi. Linton is a Ojibwe from the Chippewas of Nawash First Nation near Wearton, Ontario. He is presently in the third year of an Honours Bachelor of Arts degree in Business Studies from York University. And thirdly, we have Daniel Podnar, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today. Daniel is of Anishinaabe, Cree, Italian, and Croatian ancestry. He is third year urban studies major at York University. And we welcome your presentation.
Hi everyone, my name is Daniel and I currently major in the Urban Studies program and minor in the Childhood and Youth program at York University, located in Toronto, Ontario. I wanted to give a big thank you to those professors who had allowed me to partake in this course. It has been such a pleasure meeting everyone and continuously adding more to my knowledge about Indigenous culture.
Good day everyone, Maptang Ginagaw sa Gastronomy. I am Jordan G. Pilay and I am a member of the Iboloy ethno-linguistic group here in the Philippines. And also, I am a fourth year student taking Bachelor of Science in Mathematics at the University of the Philippines, Baguio.
Ani, Lyndon Dishnakas. Hello, my name is Lyndon and welcome to our presentation. I'm excited to have you here with us.
Social media. Social media platforms are considered powerful tools for communication, for information dissemination, and for social relations. Specifically, in social media, we see videos, we see news, and we see information on Indigenous people. And based on what we see online, we decide what to consider and not to consider. Also, using social media, it can have impacts to our own lives, future actions, and on our identities. We are Group 13 and we will be presenting a brochure on the impacts of social media on Indigenous identities. Think before you click.
I will now be speaking about the history of Indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples have faced many struggles and, as we all know, are still facing these struggles till this day. However, they do have many distinct social, political, cultural, and economic characteristics from many other cultures. Not just limited to one country, being spread across the world from the Arctic to the South Pacific, they are the descendants of those who inhabited a country or a geographical region at the time when colonizers arrived. A really interesting fact to note is that there are over 370 million indigenous across 90 countries. The new arrivals later became dominant through conquest, occupation, settlement, or other means. I will now be giving a brief introduction to social media. Within today's modern world, youth have access to a variety of social media platforms. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, social media can be defined by websites and applications that allow users to participate in social networking. These platforms include Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, WhatsApp, YouTube, Facebook Messenger, and a variety of much more. For the very next part, I will be defining two terms, one being the term Indigenous and the other being the term identity. As we continue to learn more and more every day about Indigenous peoples and their cultures, we learn that there is actually no consensus existing that creates a set definition. Note that there is a capitalization of the letter I in Indigenous, and this affirms the distinct political identities and peoplehoods of these various groups. However, the United Nations has some descriptions regarding Indigenous peoples. These include 1. Having a strong link to territories and surrounding natural resources. 2. Distinct social, economic, or political systems, along with cultures and beliefs, forming non-dominant groups of society. 3. Resolve to maintain and reproduce their ancestral environments and systems as distinctive peoples and communities. 4. Historical continuity with pre-colonial and/or pre-settler societies. 5. Self-identification as Indigenous peoples at the individual level and group level with a valuable sense of community. The next part, I will be defining the term identity. So once more, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, identity is the qualities, beliefs, personality, looks, and/or expressions that make a person or a group. Identity is important as it strengthens our character in which we are able to have more confidence within ourselves. Technically, it's like a boost for our ego. It also helps to become unique and help distinguish ourselves from others.
I will be presenting the second part or the second page of the brochure. So here is the second page or the second part. So let us view the story. Okay, so we have here the general social media usage or the general statistics on social media usage. The first panel, we have here a pie chart stating that Facebook is the most used social media platform. So it is evident that in the data gathering of the researchers, they found out that Facebook is the most used social media platform because it has many tabs or tools like the marketplace, the video tabs, the groups, and the pages tabs. So following Facebook is the YouTube, and then WhatsApp, FB Messenger, and then Instagram. The next part is on the indigenous people. So about 5% of the global population belong to indigenous communities. And then they speak more than 5,000 languages. And about 50% of them live in urban areas. In the study conducted showing this statistic or statistical result, it was found out that the reasons why some indigenous people move to urban areas is due to finding opportunities for education and then for their jobs. And the next part is the statistics on the the increase on the watching and streaming videos online, which is by 54%, and then the usage of social media platforms and messaging platforms by 42.5%. This is the reason why there is an increase in this statistical data is the pandemic COVID-19. So in some places, or in most of the places, there are lockdowns, so we cannot go out. We cannot go out to communicate to face with other people. So we just stay at home and watch videos or message our loved ones through messaging platforms. And according to the data, Philippines spends most of the time in using social media platforms by 4.08 hours, and then followed by Nigeria with 3.77 hours and Brazil with 3.68 hours. So for the references of the statistical data, you may scan this QR code. So that's all for the general statistics on social media platforms. So let us now proceed to the next part, which is this one.
And good evening, Ani, Bojo, and hello, welcome, and Lyndon Dishnakaz. My name is Linton. That's in Ojibwe, and my contribution to the brochure was to talk about how social media shapes Indigenous identities. So the various forms of social media have a complex role to play in the formation of one's Indigenous identity, especially in young people. And that was a particular focus for me because of, the young people are the next generation. And so that was of particular interest and importance for me. So benefits to social media include discovering one's indigeneity, allowing Indigenous people to connect with others to develop a sense of self, especially in young people. And social media permits an exchange of knowledge between individuals who identify as Indigenous without hindrances such as ability to travel or borders. And you need not look any further than this course INDG 3060 to see that actually in play, because we're exploring concepts of indigeneity and discovering our own indigeneity through this medium, through Zoom. So that's platforms such as Zoom, Twitter, as Jordan mentioned, Facebook as well. Those really help people discover their indigeneity. And you can use Facebook to discover information about an Indigenous Friendship Center, and they might have services like storytelling and culturally relevant programming. And so that's a very good benefit to social media. And also, I found a really interesting article. It's from the International Journal for Equity and Health, Social Media and Digital Technology Use Among Indigenous Young People in Australia. And that was a paper co-authored by Emma Rice, Emma Haynes, Paul Royce, and Sandra Thompson. And it was a very interesting read. And so it allows, what the study was relating to is how social media allows Indigenous people to connect with others, to develop a sense of self and define a sense of self, especially in the young people. And so I found that to be a fascinating read. And also the article drew the similar conclusions to my own with regards to advantages and disadvantages to social media. So moving along to the disadvantages, because we have to present a fair side to this to social media. You have your advantages and you have disadvantages, kind of like an opportunity cost thing, if anybody's familiar with economics. And okay, so going on to disadvantages, social media is easily exploited by people with malicious intent, like racism, misleading information, or cyberbullying. And platforms such as even Wikipedia, anybody can edit these pages and present false information. And Katz was my source on that. And basically what Katz was saying is that false information can spread rapidly, and it can the facts can more easily escape from their creators or owners' control. And he said that in the 1995, if I'm not mistaken. And this is relevant today, especially with the Wikipedia thing. And so going on to my next disadvantage, so social media has been found to have adverse effects on health and well-being, especially in the COVID-19 pandemic. And between May 2020 and June 2021, a study by Pringsheim, let me just get to the, it's Tamara Pringsheim and David Martino. This is rapid onset of functional tick-like behaviors in young adults during the COVID-19 pandemic from the European Journal of Neurology. So they studied people in Western Canada, young people as well as adults, and they found a prevalence of Tourette's syndrome. They were tick-like behaviors, so uncontrolled movements in young adults, and they tied that to, they were able to find a correlation between TikTok and these tick-like behaviors. And that's just in the COVID-19 pandemic. And as Jordan said, in the Philippines, there was an explosion of social media use with this pandemic. And so I found that fascinating that social media can have an effect on your health outside of what we're familiar with. Like, if you use the phone before bedtime, sometimes that light can affect your sleep. So there, like we know there's certain downsides to social media use. But now we have this tick-like behavior, just uncontrolled movements. That was something that really I was surprised by. And also, I got to wrap this up. So social media can be harmful in the sexual development of young people. There's sexting, and that's detrimental to the identities of the young Aboriginal people in Australia. And so those are advantages and disadvantages. And I also have a summary that on the left-hand corner of your screen that actually you can explore a list of the advantages and disadvantages. And please check the references and scan the code, please, if you would like to learn more about any of the studies that I cited.
Miigwech, for your presentation, we have two facilitators from this program who will be providing commentary on the presentation that we just watched. We have Michael Hill, Professor Michael Hill, who is not Indigenous, but continues to grow as an Indigenous ally. He is a professor of cultural anthropology at Universidad San Francisco de Quito in Quito, Ecuador, and has collaborated primarily with Quechua and Quichua people and communities from Peru and Ecuador. Also joining him is Professor Consuelo Fernandez Salvador, who holds a PhD in development studies and is also a professor of cultural anthropology at Universidad San Francisco de Quito in Ecuador. She identifies as mestiza and has worked with Shuar and Quechua people and with Indigenous students from different groups at USFQ. And on that note, we welcome your commentary.
Good evening or good morning, everyone, wherever you're tuning in from. And, first of all, congratulations to this group, to Daniel and Jordan and Linton for this wonderful start to the Knowledge Fair and your presentation. I was really struck by the breadth of their approach to this question, the context, super interesting data points that they provided, their broad conception of social media as it relates to issues of identity, Indigenous identity and representation, and physical and mental health, and also this sort of balanced approach to advantages and disadvantages. I also like the sort of campaign of think before you click, and that phrase. And I want to say that I think their presentation invites us to think about some other issues as well. First of all, the digital divide. So along with the questions of representation and effects on identity, also the question of who has access and what quality of access to digital media and social media in the first place. And in the context of Ecuador, for example, we know that Indigenous and also rural communities generally are far more disadvantaged in terms of their level of access. And of course, that's a class issue as well. So that intersectionality of the digital divide and exploring that, I think, is important to think about. I thought it was interesting that this group focuses on youth, but it invites us also to think about diverse generational experiences on social media and effects on identity, not only for youth, but for people of all generations, Indigenous people of all generations. And then thirdly, their presentation caused me to reflect on the fact that though certain aspects of social media may be or feel liberatory in terms of expressions of identity, we should not forget that these are corporatized, privatized, capitalist, for-profit spaces, and question that context. So this question of ownership of the spaces where these interactions are happening. And it maybe throws new light on the question of, do we decide? What do we decide, and how do we? Who is the we, and what's inherent in that idea of making decisions in a space that's corporatized and privatized? But also it invites new possibilities for social media platforms that can be indigenously owned, managed, and oriented more towards Indigenous people. So I just wanted to bring those thoughts to bear. So thank you very much. And again, congratulations to this group, and I'll pass it on to Consuelo.
Hello, everybody. Good night, good morning for people who are just getting up in the morning. I just wanted to say thank you for being able to share in this knowledge fair. And I really wanted to congratulate the students in this project, Daniel, Jordan, and Linton. I really liked the idea of the brochure. I thought the brochure was a great way for showcasing your ideas and research on social media and Indigenous identity. And I was pretty impressed of the design and everything. And I thought the video actually complemented and allowed more explanation on certain issues. So I thought the combination of the two, of the brochure and the video, was a great way of showing your project and the research you had done. I was also pretty impressed on general information, statistics in the literature that was Linton especially was citing at the end of the project. So I really like that. In terms of the content of the project, I especially appreciated that you spent some time discussing what it means to be Indigenous. And I know this is not straightforward concept, and you did acknowledge that there's not a simple definition or even consensus about it. So I thought that was very important to mention in the beginning, especially because of the context of your project, since you wanted to link the discussion of social media and identity and the impact of social media on the construction of identity, which also brings me to the other issue that I liked, which is this perspective that identities are in constant construction and adaptation. And as you also argue, they are shaped by different factors such as social media, precisely, which is the topic of your project. I think it was also very important when that you talked about young Indigenous people in the project, and that you mentioned that there are about 50% of Indigenous people living in urban areas. And I think this, of course, has a lot of implication in terms of access to technology and information and what this does to the experience of being Indigenous. And as Michael said before, this can be very positive, and that was also mentioned in the project, the access of information, the ability to connect with others, the ability to share virtual spaces like this and connect with Indigenous people from all over the world. But these implications can also be negative, and this is more in relation to who really has access to this technology and information. And as Michael was mentioning before, in many countries, Latin America, Africa, etc., Asia, there might be many spaces marginal to the access of technology and information. So I think this is also something to take into consideration. Finally, a theme that I found interesting in your discussion, and maybe it could be developed further, and I don't know, maybe you would want to take this into further research at some point in your lives, is the impact of racist and discriminatory content in the internet. And you actually mentioned all this very interesting research on platforms like Wikipedia circulating this false information, right? But I thought it would also be interesting to discuss what racist content per se, not necessarily in terms of false information, but in terms of memes, images, videos, and even comments accompanying, all these images that we find everywhere. We find in Facebook, we find in Twitter, we find in Instagram, right? And what all these images, all this circulation of images, what do they do to the self of the sense of self and self-representation, as you were arguing also earlier in the project, and the notions of identity, especially among young Indigenous people? How do young Indigenous people deal with this? How they react with this? How do they internalize all this imagery and in discourses around what it means to be Indigenous, most of them based on stereotypes and of course built on racist images too, right? So I think this could be things that could be developed further, but I really thought that this project was touched on very important and interesting issues. I really congratulate the 3 students in this project, and I was really glad to be able to comment on it. So congratulations and good night.
Miigwech, Michael, and Consuelo for your commentary, and I'll pass it over to Carolyn to introduce the next presentation.
Great, Miigwech, Brianna, and to the first panelists for kicking this off. It was a great way to start. So I just want to let everybody know that our next presentation is going to be partly in Spanish and partly in English. So for those people who don't speak Spanish like me, you can turn on the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It's the globe symbol that's in the bottom right-hand corner, and click on English if you need to have it from Spanish to English. So, I think everybody who only speaks Spanish already knows that they can click on the Spanish button. So forgive me in advance. I have no knowledge of Spanish whatsoever, so my pronunciation is pretty terrible, but please bear with me. Our second group is called La Música como Sanación, Music as Healing. And there's three people in this group, and one of them is here today, and the other two unfortunately could not be, but I'll introduce them as well. So the first person who is here tonight is Gabriela, or Gabby Aguilar, who's from Ecuador, San Francisco de Quito in Ecuador. She's a Quechua Otavalo woman, native of a rural sector of Imbambura, Ecuador, and she's also a law student at USFQ. So her vision is related to peasants in the city. So the city does not eliminate the countryside that Indigenous people carry from within, which are the valleys of the Don, the Otavalo, to the far reaches of the Altiplano. So the next two students who unfortunately could not be here, one is Diego Ivan Regaldo Hernandez, who is a York University student. He is a Zapotec whose family is from Oaxaca in Mexico. So he's a second-year student in liberal arts and professional studies, and he's an incredibly talented artist. And then the third student in this project is Daly Valeria Toval Diaz, who is from Tec de Costa Rica. So she's a Brunca woman from Costa Rica and a second-year student at the Instituto Tecnológico de Costa Rica. All right, so let's hear their presentation now.
Buenas noches, compañeros, esperando que estén de lo mejor. En esta ocasión, nuestro grupo, conformado por Diego Regalado, Laili Valeria y mi persona, vamos a proceder a exponer una temática sumamente interesante, la cual es la música como sanación. Esperamos sea de su agrado. Para adentrarnos en la explicación de esta temática sumamente interesante, vamos a partir desde el carácter espiritual y social de la música. En este punto partiremos sabiendo que la música es una de las expresiones culturales más antiguas y diversas que existen en los grupos humanos. Tanto desde la historia ha venido evolucionando y acompañándonos en este desarrollo. Pueden servir como un elemento de análisis para la comprensión de las relaciones sociales del individuo con su entorno y con su subjetividad. Como todo arte, sea la música, la pintura, la poesía y todas los componentes que existan del arte, responden a un contexto de espacio y tiempo en el que el individuo ejerce su actividad. Este fragmento sumamente importante lo hemos extraído del libro que ha realizado el cantante, compositor, también escritor, Enrique Males. Continuando con esta misma línea, puedo mencionar que en el mundo andino el sonido fue y es un componente muy importante, indispensable en los campos de la espiritualidad, lo ritual, lo místico y lo ceremonial. Tanto es así que dentro de, por ejemplo, Tabalo, que es una comunidad bastante activa en aspectos culturales, podemos presenciar este acompañamiento de la música tanto en la muerte, por ejemplo, en la pérdida de un niño conocido como el Wawawañuy, también en espacios sagrados como al momento de realizar el matrimonio, que es el Sawari, también acompaña la música, y espacios en donde uno puede distinguir, ¿no?, cuando uno está iniciando su etapa de vida y también cuando uno ya parte de este mundo. Así que en todos estos procesos la música ha venido acompañando, obviamente haciendo sus variaciones y teniendo una conexión completamente directa, porque incluso acá en Otavalo tenemos un ritual llamado One Day, que es netamente enfocado cuando una persona pierde a un ser querido, no necesariamente un bebé, sino un ser querido ya adulto. Y lo que aquí se procede a realizar es que cuando ya están previos a realizar el entierro, más o menos en la madrugada, todavía cuando existe el alba, las personas familiares realizan una especie de procesión en donde todos gritan One Day, que es una especie de frase también un poco acompañado de ritmos, Y la intención de esto es ayudar al alma, al espíritu, a que pueda ir fluyendo y no se quede aquí, no se quede en este mundo. Y es una especie de impulso que se realiza acompañado de la música y también conectando a algunos ritmos de vibración que hablaremos adelante. La vibración en la sanación ocupa un rol indispensable, tanto es así que es importante establecer que el cuerpo humano se beneficia de la percepción de vibraciones sonoras específicas que promulgan su salud y que pueden trabajar como una herramienta de sanación en otros casos. Así que en este punto podemos ya poder palpar, poder obviamente discernir que la música sí ocupa un rol y tiene un efecto dentro de nuestra vida, tanto como en el espacio, en el tiempo, en el momento en el que nosotros lo recibamos. Existen también diferentes temáticas, diferentes ritmos como la música celta, música ceremonial, música que nos acompaña en diferentes procesos rituales o espirituales y que a lo largo vemos que sí se refleja una especie de beneficio para el cuerpo y de esta manera haciendo este bonito impacto de sanarnos, tanto como en la salud físicamente, emocionalmente y mentalmente, como también iremos analizándolo más a continuación con las intervenciones de mis compañeros.
Hola compañeros, a mí me gustaría explicar un poco sobre lo que es la musicoterapia, porque básicamente nos especificamos en esto. Básicamente consiste en usar las respuestas y conexiones de una persona con la música para estimular cambios positivos en el estado de ánimo y el bienestar general. La terapia musical puede incluir crear música con instrumentos de todo tipo, cantar, moverse o simplemente escucharla. Después de toda nuestra investigación, nos dimos cuenta de que hay ciertos beneficios que vimos en lo que es curar los traumas mediante la música. Básicamente hay una mejor autoestima, hay menor ansiedad, mayor motivación y hay una gran liberación emocional exitosa y segura, que con esto nos referimos a expresar nuestras emociones, básicamente. Hay mayor verbalización y mediante las canciones, básicamente la canción que hicimos, logramos conexiones más fuertes con otras personas, o en este caso, entre nosotros tres.
Amazing, great talk, guys. So right now I'm gonna just describe a little why I think art is a great tool for healing. Music specifically, just as music, it's an art. It's an art form. So art has been around since ancient times, as you already know. We humans have used it to express themselves for a really long time, and we still do. And we use art to speak for us when we cannot find words, when we cannot find a suitable way to describe a feeling or just express it. Even if we do have words, sometimes the feeling that you might feel might be too strong. So you might want to scream or sing or just like do some art to make this feeling go away, or not go away, but transport it to whoever you want to impact or get this message. So it is for the reason that professional art therapy began in the mid-20th century as a restorative practice that allowed people to express themselves. And this is nothing new. Art, again, as I said before, has always been a tool for expressing themselves. You can see that in cave art, in art, from contemporary art for now. So music has been part of art and can be used and should be used therefore as a healing method that will help individuals cope with experiences that might have had an impact on them, more specifically with trauma. So I saw a video, Foothills Medical Center, and they were doing music therapy for treating acute neurological patients, right? And they were using this sort of like method of rehabilitation with music for helping these individuals, and actually they had great success in that. So this proves that art can be used positively and can help individuals cope well, just heal, physically. So well, I'm saying that it also possibly can help individuals heal mentally and spiritually. So after a traumatic experience, individuals can, and you don't need to be a good singer to use this method. If you like to sing and out loud, you can use that. You can create music. So I think the process of that creation is an important part of how you will be able to heal. And just also singing the song. You don't also have, not necessarily you don't need to be able to sing or to write. You can either do one of those two. Perhaps someone else wrote a song that you really like and you really feel connected to, and by singing it, perhaps you're letting go of some of that those bad experiences. So yeah, this is why I think music is a really important tool. Just art in general and music more specifically in this topic, to be able to help someone cope through art. And I like singing a lot. Well, actually, like listening to music, and yes, I do sing sometimes when I have like a bad or experience and I want to let it go. I would use music to scream out loud. So for instance, there was a time where I was singing with my friends and I really felt that I wanted to like scream out loud for my feelings to sort of be able to dissipate, right? So I use music as a way to cope with not with problems, but with expressing feelings or letting them go away.
Y bueno, de todo lo que les había estado explicando acerca de la música y el rol que tienen diferentes culturas, en este caso yo puedo mencionar que está muy presente en muchos eventos, como ya les mencionaba. También están cuando existen las ceremonias del matrimonio acá en Otavalo, cuando existe la conmemoración al Día de los Difuntos, cuando ocurren los raimis, que son las fiestas que se encuentran realizados por los solsticios, y canciones también que son dedicadas al agua, y no solamente son dedicadas, sino que en sí se estructuran por esa razón de ser. Así que en este punto vamos a ver un video que es de el cantante, autor, compositor que hemos venido ya conversando, Enrique Males. En este punto, Enrique lo que hace es una bienvenida a un espacio justo hasta donde recuerdo el documental, decían que ahí estaba inaugurando un coliseo. Y lo que él hace es no solamente hacer música, sino que tiene elementos como tabaco, como plantas y todo tipo de elementos que se necesitan para hacer una ceremonia de bienvenida, quitando tal vez a las malas energías, los espíritus que quizá tal vez no nos acompañan de una buena forma. Así que él lo hace de forma muy simbólica, pero también lo mezcla con la música. Y es ahí en donde vemos el protagonismo de la música en general, de cómo impacta, cómo llega y cómo es indispensable en la mayoría de procesos que nosotros llegamos a tener. Y también a continuación vamos a ver otro ejemplo muy distinto, pero en cambio en este quiero que se enfoquen los elementos que utilizan, la vibración y tonalidad que realiza y eso. Entonces, que disfruten el video. Y bueno, en cambio aquí vamos a analizar una música, una canción muy distinta, muy opuesta a la que ya les estaba mencionando, como la primera, como la de Enrique Males. Esa era para abrir un espacio, inaugurar un espacio y darle la bienvenida, ¿no?, a las nuevas energías y a todo lo nuevo que nos piensa acompañar dentro de los procesos que decidamos realizar, ¿no? Pero en cambio ahorita, por ejemplo, como fondo musical, en este momento en mi exposición, pueden escuchar una especie de canción tal vez media triste, se podría decir, y esta es netamente para acompañar el proceso de la pérdida del guaguaguañuy, que es en quichua como que pérdida del bebé, o sea, pérdida de un ser querido. Y aquí es muy indispensable que la música vaya acompañando, porque si bien es cierto, dentro de nuestra cosmovisión andina quichua o tabalo, porque dentro de toda mi explicación me refiero solamente a esa, donde tengo mayor conocimiento, es que la música en este punto de pérdida, de tristeza, melancolía y dolor, está para acompañar a los vivos y un poco a los muertos, como por ejemplo esto del proceso y la ceremonia del Wandiay. Ese proceso es para que el alma, el espíritu pueda encontrar y pueda descansar en paz, el lugar de armonía, ¿no? En el Hanak Pachak, en el más allá. Mientras que los ritmos, como se llaman, fandangos, San Juanitos, que son con esta melodía que sigue este patrón, dicen que hace una especie de conexión dentro del corazón. O sea, hay una vibración que esta tiene, una resonancia directa, para que de esa manera te vaya acompañando en ese dolor y sea este mismo ritmo que sea un impulso para poder verlo de una forma no tan negativa, no como que alguien ya desapareció, sino que alguien se elevó al más allá, se elevó a un mundo mucho mejor en donde hay mayor respeto, mayor aprecio a la vida, irónicamente, y así es conocido acá en el mundo andino. Así que ahorita, por ejemplo, voy a presentarles una canción que es de los Umazapas, es de una comunidad acá de Cotacachi, y ellos, por ejemplo, tienen una costumbre muy, muy arraigada acerca de acompañar en fechas muy especiales mezcladas con el catolicismo, pero es una mezcla de fe con el hecho de poder mezclar nuestros ritmos musicales andinos. Así que aquí se ve clarito cómo mujeres acompañan con cantos, como hombres siguen entonando música, y todo hace una conexión, todo es como una especie de torbellino, en donde la idea es poder conectar, no solamente que se escuche bonito, sino que vibre hasta el más allá, vibre hasta el espíritu que te está oyendo. Así que espero que les guste, y con esto estaría cerrando mi presentación y también la de mis compañeros. Ha sido un verdadero gusto compartir y con ustedes el último video musical, y espero que en verdad les guste porque es muy, muy simbólico y muy bien elaborado. Gracias.
Desde lejos venimos, donde las estrellas, donde nace el sol. Luz es lo que somos, luz es lo que somos.
Okay, I just want to congratulate all three presenters, and Gabby, if you can convey that to your group, I will as well. That was really beautiful, and especially the song at the end. So our commentator for this panel is actually Brianna. So Brianna, come on back.
Hello, everyone. I just want to say a big miigwech and niawa to you, Gabriela, for your group's presentation. I'll acknowledge Diego and Valeria as well. I really appreciated your creativity and that sensorial approach to presenting, where you incorporated the music as well. And also the personal sharing of your various experiences as Indigenous peoples and your community's approach to healing through music. There are a number of things I've taken away from this presentation, and there are a few that stuck out with me in particular that I would like to speak to during this time. One is that you'd mentioned closer to the beginning that social codes, norms, and values that outline and set the tone of relations and relationships in specific situations are embedded in music, and how the arts are contextually specific. And what I found really interesting there is that you see that music in particular, along with other art forms, but speaking to music, it's not just a method of cultural expression, but it's also home to knowledge of the Andean peoples that you were speaking to specifically. And it's home to that knowledge, that worldview, and the importance of being in the world, and those protocols on how to be in the world and how to conduct yourself in certain manners depending on the situation. So I thought that was really interesting to note. Also, that you spoke in the presentation to well-being and how connectedness, existing in that web of relationships, that sense of belonging, and how that contributes to a sense of self. All of that contributes to well-being, to healing, and it shapes personal identity. So that idea of connectedness and how our existence in webs of relationships as Indigenous people shapes our collective identity. And then I wanted to also bring attention to Diego's point as well when he was speaking to music as healing. He noted that music is accessible to everyone. And I thought that that was interesting because we see it in a different perspective than perhaps a perspective you'd normally see in Western culture. So here you see that shift to it being seen as a community practice, as opposed to this individualized approach where participating in the creation of music is reserved only to the talented, and that talented as being defined by Western standards. You see that here, everybody can participate in the creation of music. And that's really speaking to the spirit and the pride in community and how that shapes the sense of self. I also appreciated your example of sharing how music is important to spiritual, ritual, and ceremonial life of Andean cultures, and sharing with us that variety of examples and speaking to the range of ceremonies that music in particular is prevalent in. You spoke to the protocols associated with Andean cultures and opening a space, and that knowledge and that sequence of events that opens that space in a good way. And also, again, speaking to those relationships and the incorporation of our plant kin in these rituals as well, which I thought was particularly interesting because plants come with their own teachings that they give to us, and incorporating them in that ritual with music, it's really a collective approach to opening a space in that particular example. And then also speaking to your example of how music is fundamental in sending a loved one to the spirit world. And I believe, I'm sorry for my pronunciation, I believe you referred to that ritual as being wenge. Hopefully I have that right. You can correct me later if I am wrong. But you see how the values and knowledge are instilled in the music in this example in particular. You see that processing grief is collective, and you see that support that community gives in processing one's grief during that loss of a loved one. You see the importance of music in guiding the soul to the next chapter for the soul, and that beautiful send-off to the next chapter in life for the soul. And speaking to that idea of the loved one who has been, I guess, I don't like saying the word lost, but lost perhaps in this world that we live in. You see them, that idea of them rising to a better world and the next chapter and that soul's existence. And then the values also speak to how life is to be appreciated and respected. So I thought that was a beautiful example of those social codes and norms and values that are embedded in that specific example. Miigwech Niawa for speaking to that in the presentation. And lastly, that song that you and your group created was very beautiful. It was really it was a welcome surprise, I must say. And I think that it particularly speaks to resilience of Indigenous peoples during COVID and what coming together again to process all the grief and what we've lost through COVID and what we've gained, and doing that together as a community. And so I do have a few questions about that song in particular, but I will save that until the question and answer period. But miigwech, niawa, and congratulations on your presentation. It was spectacular.
Okay, great. We are going to take a 5-minute break now. So by my clock, I have 22 minutes after 8. So let's all resume here at 27 minutes after 8 or 27 minutes after the hour, wherever you are around the world. Okay, so we'll see everybody in 5 minutes.
If I can just speak to Professor Michael's commentary, I think that digital divide, and especially Professor Consuelo, her input on access to a fair education is important, and that's definitely a focus and interest for me personally, and that is something I enjoy from participating in that project.
Okay, welcome back everyone from the break. We have our third and final presentation for this evening, and it will be a presentation on Indigenous languages in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It's a website, and we'll have this video walkthrough of the website. And for the students present in this group, I invite you to turn on your cameras as well as I acknowledge you. We have joining us tonight, Maria Jesusa, MJ, Leonardo Gambuelo. I am sorry if I pronounced your last name incorrectly. MJ is from Baguette, Kanakani, with a sprinkle of Ibaloi and Kalangoya, ethno-linguistic group in the Cordillera, Philippines. She is now a few steps away in completing her Master's of Management at the University of Philippines, Baguio. Congratulations on being near the completion. And joining us as well is Moises Salguero Morales. Moises is an Indigenous Quebecer from an Indigenous territory called Taini in Costa Rica. He attends Tecnológica de Costa Rica and studies engineering. We're happy to have you join us as well. We have two other group members who unfortunately couldn't be with us this evening, but I will acknowledge them as well. Alisa Argueta Hinkson is a mixed woman, Maya Lokono Arawak, Celtic and African ancestry, in her fourth year at York University, majoring in Indigenous Studies. And also we have Tane Martin. Tane is a Biripi man from the mid-north coast of New South Wales on Australia's east coast. Tane is a final year Commerce and Arts student at the University of New South Wales. And we will now watch their presentation.
Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon to wherever you may be joining us from. My name is Tane Martin, and I am a Biripi man from Australia's east coast. I am proud to be here today to unveil our exciting new project, the Indigenous Languages in the Fourth Industrial Revolution project, simply known as ILFA. ILFA is an exciting and interactive website to navigate the complexities of technology and its impacts on Indigenous communities. Our project is collaborated by our team of Indigenous students from 4 countries. We have myself from Australia, Elisa in Canada, MJ from the Philippines, and Moises from Costa Rica. To begin, I will display the opening pages of our website. Here we have our home page featuring our logo and a brief comment alluding to what the ILFA project is going to be about. At the top, you can also see some categories including the history and empowering aspects of Fourth Industrial Revolution technologies, as well as current worldwide examples, to which we will each dive into later on. Next up, we have our About and Profile page. Each member of the team has made important contributions to the creation of ILFA, so it is only fair that we highlight our extremely valuable team members. We've also included our About and Vision statement to allow you to understand what our goals are for this project. As you can see, the main vision of the project is to explore the nature of Indigenous languages as a knowledge system in the 21st century. Why we are doing this is because we understand that 21st century growth of technology has extended the colonial impacts faced for Indigenous languages. Many Indigenous languages across the globe are facing extinction or already are extinct. As a part of ILFA, we unpack both the negative aspects as well as the empowerment of Indigenous languages through digital technologies. We are doing this as Indigenous languages are sacred and are the gateway and archives to Indigenous knowledge. Additionally, we are beginning to see some very exciting projects in many countries that work towards the revitalisation of Indigenous languages. As part of the ILFA project, we want to raise greater awareness to these resources and tools, which will continue to be deeply impactful as we continue to live through the digital age. Finally, we hope that this project is collaborative, where you as users will be able to contribute content to the sustained growth of this project.
The history section is most like an abstract section. You will find there some facts that will make you have the emotion to keep reading the project. For example, did you know that the UN has highlighted that over 2,000 indigenous languages around the world are in danger of extinction? Everyone knows nowadays that technologies are in universal languages, for example, English or Spanish. This is one of the reasons why indigenous peoples are teaching their children foreign languages with the aim that they have opportunities in the modern world. As such, these impacts have meant further marginalization of indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples have experienced social trauma as well as challenges regarding the access of economics and health resources as a result to not being able to practice traditional languages. When indigenous languages are being suppressed by colonial and capitalist structures, so too are empowering abilities of indigenous communities to thrive on their own. The ILFA project will highlight the global success, empowerment, and revitalization of indigenous languages through the Fourth Industrial Revolution, with the focus that these practices should be continued to empower indigenous communities in the ongoing future.
On our website, we also cover how technology can help revitalize and empower indigenous languages and knowledge systems. Cover 4 main areas of modern media as a form of indigenous language revitalization, the first being social media. Social media apps like TikTok and YouTube provide a space for indigenous people to share their knowledge and take part in their languages. There are many examples of indigenous people sharing and teaching their languages in hopes of people learning from them. Movies and TV also provide a good source for indigenous language revitalization. Growing up, there was not much indigenous representation in shows or movies for us. Having someone look like you and even speak your language is powerful and empowering for indigenous and their identity. Presently, there has been an increasing amount of projects that have indigenous directors and actors. Including indigenous languages within this type of media educates and encourages indigenous youth to learn their native tongues. An example of this would be the Haida film Sugwe Kuna, or in English, Edge of the Knife, which is entirely in Haida, as well as directed by members of the Haida Nation. Phone apps are an especially useful tool for language revitalization. These language learning apps are currently able to provide learning and interactive aspects for eager language learners. There are some apps that teach you indigenous languages from all over the world. These apps have tests, flashcards, and word puzzles to help increase learning. Language learning apps can be especially helpful for youth to learn their languages as they're interactive, accessible, and fun. Finally, video games can help teach indigenous youth languages in a fun and interactive way. Although there are not many video games with indigenous languages, I personally believe video games can be the next step in language revitalization. Kids spend many hours playing games, so why not incorporate indigenous knowledge and language within these games? There have already been a few games made that have taken the challenge of incorporating indigenous knowledge and language within them, like the game He Hau, A New World, which is a game developed in the Hawaiian language Olelo Hawaii. The section basically is a bunch of videos be collected to show indigenous languages in modern media. So there are clips from YouTube, from TikTok, some movies, also a clip about the game that I mentioned in the previous slide.
For indigenous peoples, languages not only identify their origin or membership in a community, they also carry the ethical values of their ancestors, the indigenous knowledge systems that make them one with the land and are crucial to their survival and to the hopes and aspirations of their youth. Thank you, Elisa, for empowering us with that indigenous languages in the modern media. Few reminders from our team. We are all encouraged to engage in ethical and appropriate behavior as digital citizens, because anything posted or shared online can never be taken back. This is what Indigenous Footprints is all about. The Indigenous people's digital knowledge systems and the digital footprints stands for the legacies our ancestors left behind. Be a good digital citizen. Protect private information. Stay safe online. Balance the use of media. Respect others. Stand up to cyberbullying when you see it happening. Respect copyright and intellectual property, and carefully manage your digital footprint as we discover what is happening in the ILFA worldwide.
Thank you to MJ for the great introduction to the Indigenous footprint. I'm really excited by the great initiatives that are going on across the world, and in particular, I will now dive into some of the examples here in Australia. For some background knowledge, Australia has over 250 Indigenous languages and up to 800 distinct dialects. Some areas of Australia may feature many languages in a small region or many dialects within one language. Indigenous languages are deeply sacred in Australia. This quote at the bottom of the screen by Benjamin Mabo from Mer Island in Australia's north exemplifies why Indigenous languages are sacred in Australia. The land gave birth to language, meaning that language and culture are inseparable. From this quote, we can understand that language, culture, and Indigenous knowledge are inextricably connected. Languages, just like Indigenous knowledge systems, have existed since time immemorial. As mentioned throughout our vision of ILFA, Indigenous languages in Australia have been crippled at the hands of colonisation. It is believed that of the 250 languages, half have been lost, with many more on the brink of extinction, up to 90% in fact. In recent decades, there have been shifts in Indigenous language practice, with modified languages such as Aboriginal English, Pidgin, and Creole becoming more common. Additionally, 21st century innovations have also opened pathways for a revitalisation of Indigenous languages in Australia. There are currently over 30 apps on the Apple App Store that teach Indigenous Australian languages from a range of regions. While it would be a challenge to look into all of them today, we've chosen 3 major ones that are playing important roles in bringing Indigenous language to life. As you can see on our website, a link to Creative Spirits with information on all of these apps is included. The first app is called First Voices and is actually an app that encompasses more than Australia, including Canada. A product of the First Peoples Cultural Council, this app provides a space for Indigenous people to take control in sharing and promoting their languages. The content is always worked with alongside elders to create voice recordings, dictionaries, songs and stories that community members can gain access to. The next one is Miriwong. The app, created by Miramar Aboriginal Council, is an interactive dictionary of over 1,400 terms from the Miriwong people of the Kununurra region in Western Australia. The app allows users to listen and learn terms and play games to apply these terms into the real-world languages. The final app we have selected is the AECG Languages app, the AECG being the New South Wales Aboriginal Education Consultative Group. The app is another learning tool with languages sourced from communities right across New South Wales, including languages of the Bundjalung, Gamilaroi, Gumbaynggirr, Pakanchi, and Wiradjuri nations. What is most important to note about the 3 apps that we selected is that they are all created by or closely in conjunction with Indigenous communities. To have Indigenous communities involved at the very base level of these apps is critical in following Indigenous protocol while leaping into new bounds of 21st century and the revitalisation of Indigenous languages. These apps are also bringing new and creative methods into the learning and storing of Indigenous languages. Additionally, Australia's work towards the preservation of Indigenous language is not limited to smartphone apps. Schools are becoming another tool where Indigenous languages are being implemented through the Yabalinya government initiative. As a result of this, New South Wales, which is the state that I live, has recently opened its first bilingual school for Aboriginal languages in Coffs Harbour in the state's north, which is Gumbaynggirr country. And this happened in November 2021. I think it is important to end with this quote that I have placed here from Bulari Morley Nyangan Aboriginal Corporation CEO Clark Webb. And again, it shows from a community perspective that the preservation and revitalisation of Indigenous languages is sacred, and as we are living in the digital age, it is a critical time to continue working towards the revitalisation of our Indigenous language.
When a language is lost, you lose the spirit of the culture, and it's really heartbreaking. It is believed that the roadmap and key to cultural identity and expression is language. The Philippines, as a multilingual nation, is home for 186 individual languages. Of this, 182 are living and 4 are extinct. Filipino and English are the 2 official languages of the Philippines. Filipino, which is based on Tagalog, is the national language, while English is widely used as medium of instruction in higher education. There are about 76 to 78 major language groups, which more than 500 are dialects. Indigenous languages are referred to as dialects and accorded as less important than national languages, contributing to their eventual loss. A language can become endangered when fewer people choose to use it, more so in this fourth industrial revolution with overflowing data, information, blurring facts. Languages are disappearing at an astonishing rate, and the pace shows no sign of abating. Many Filipino languages are at high risk of extinction. Thus, the ILFIR recognizes the relevant collaborative efforts to revitalize the indigenous languages in the Philippines. There are several efforts in restoring the indigenous languages in the country. ILFIR highlighted on the following. Merayam. This is a dictionary-making tool funded by the Department of Science and Technology that can be used as online dictionary for Philippine indigenous languages. What is great with this project is it allows interested language communities to create an online dictionary whose content would be owned by its members and peer-reviewed by language experts. The content is a community-based effort done by people who speak and practice the language. You can check more of the details on marayom.ph. To keep abreast with the challenge of revitalizing our indigenous languages, the Department of Education keeps improving its mother tongue-based multilingual education. In 2018, 5 literacy apps, namely Bahay Kubo, Kaalam, Taalam, Taderia, and Matigsalug were developed by Smart Communications in partnership with DepEd, local stakeholders, colleges, and universities. You can download more of these apps on Google Play. With the current estimates, only 1/10 of today's languages will remain by the coming of the 22nd century. So, aside from the apps presented previously, there are other notable programs established to revitalize and promote indigenous languages in the country. In the Philippine archipelago, the geographical area poses a great challenge in adapting to the fourth industrial revolution. Despite that, many indigenous communities have already instituted their own systems of revitalizing their languages. The Enhanced Schools of Living Traditions program around the Philippines keep cultural forms alive, including languages. SLT is one where a living master, culture bearer, or culture specialist teaches skills and techniques of doing a traditional art or craft. The mode of teaching is usually non-formal, oral, and with practical demonstrations. Educators, researchers, and cultural advocates constantly improve their means in keeping the indigenous languages alive to keep up with the advances of the fourth industrial revolution. In Baguio City, the launching of PhD in Indigenous Studies at UP Baguio has opened yet another opportunity for indigenous students to further improve and manage the culture, land, and languages they inherited. This is also their way to give back to the indigenous communities where they belong. This PhD program is responsive to local and international developments in relation to initiatives for indigenous peoples' rights and cultures. With this, allow me to share with you a message from our national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal. Ang hindi marunong magmahal sa sariling wika ay higit pa sa hayop at malansang isda. He who does not love his own language is worse than an animal and smelly fish.
In Costa Rica, there are 8 indigenous peoples. 4 of them can speak their own language, which are Cabecars, Bribris, Malecus, and Naves. The Borucas can't speak their language at 100%, and the Tervas are learning their language since they had lost the language. And the other 2 indigenous peoples, which are Chorotegas and Huetares, they can't speak their language. As you can see, there is a problem here. Indigenous peoples are losing their languages due to the reasons mentioned before and other reasons. In answer to this problem, some people are working on technologies that will make possible for indigenous peoples maintain in contact with their languages in their daily life. For example, there is a keyboard called Chipcha, and with this keyboard you can write in your own indigenous language. This makes the life easier to those people who want to write in their indigenous language because the usual or standard keyboards that cell phones have doesn't include indigenous characters, and there are some dictionaries from indigenous languages to Spanish, since Spanish is the official language in my country. In this example, we have the Bribri Spanish dictionary, but there are some other dictionaries in my country.
This is ILFIR Project, a collaborative work that supports the languages of indigenous peoples representing complex systems of knowledge and communication, which should be recognized as a strategic national resource for development, peace building, and reconciliation. Here at ILFIR, we believe that across the world, indigenous peoples have been witnessing and experiencing the impacts of technological revolution that has fundamentally altered the way we live, work, and relate to one another. The first industrial revolution used water and steam power to mechanize production. The second used electric power to create mass production. The third used electronics and information technology to automate production. Now this fourth industrial revolution has built on the third, the digital revolution that has been occurring since the middle of the last century. It is characterized by a fusion of technologies that is blurring the lines between the physical, digital, and biological spheres. Today, billions of people are connected by mobile devices with unprecedented processing power, storage capacity, and unlimited access to knowledge. We would like to hear your stories too. Visit our website today, get your device and check ilfir.mystrikingly.com. That is all lowercase, ilfir.mystrikingly.com, and share how these technologies impacted your indigenous languages. Maya-mayat ay agot ako ang inadwani. A pleasant day once again, and greetings for the holidays from ILFIR team composed of Tane from Australia, Elisa from Canada, Moises from Costa Rica, and myself, MJ, from the Philippines.
Miigwech Niawa for such a brilliant presentation, and I encourage everyone to take a look at the website as well. And today we have another facilitator from the program and commentator, Professor Gabrielle Fletcher. Professor Gabrielle Fletcher is a Gundungurra traditional custodian from the Blue Mountains of New South Wales, Australia. She is Professor in Indigenous Studies and the Director of the National Indigenous Knowledges, Education, Research and Innovation, Nikurai Institute at Deakin University, Australia. And we welcome your commentary, Professor Gabrielle Fletcher.
Hey, thanks very much, Brianna, and good morning, good evening, good night to everybody that's present today. Before I begin to comment on the fabulous presentation, I just would like to make a comment that I've just been really impressed with everybody's presentations today. So thank you so much as well. So Elisa, MJ, Moises, and Tane, thank you for the care and the time you have spent in researching and developing your presentation, and of course the ILFA website. What was immediately clear to me was this was a very thoughtful and balanced presentation with a strong sense of co-design and co-construction from all of you. So it's very collaborative. The vision statement for the ILFA project at the beginning of your piece was an excellent framing device where you articulated clearly the devisement of a space to both empower and disrupt the impact and the possibility of digital technologies in the fourth industrial revolution. And the core concept of language as part of an Indigenous knowledge systems came through really strongly. Not just language in its own right, but as part of an ongoing and evolving system. Throughout, you make clear why First Nations languages are central to our ways of valuing, being, knowing and doing, and the livingness of that centrality. I really appreciated that. And the reference to dominant language as it is represented in digital spaces was resonant for me, particularly as it relates to, for example, AI and predictive text, for example, in the use of mobile phones or cell phones, that a device might anticipate thinking. That is what you want to say. speaks to a whole continuing process of colonizing the mind, where languages, as you have pointed out, connects to concepts and context. And actually, just as an aside over here, I floated off for a moment, which is a really good sign that your work was really engaging. It just reminded me for a moment, I went to the work of George Orwell in his seminal novel, dystopian novel, 1984, and the notion of old speak and new speak. And that was written basically in 1949, it was published in 1949, where basically words are dropped out of new speak, and so too, therefore, are concepts. For example, if there's no word for freedom, then that concept drops out. And so reality is altered. It is unfortunately far too easy to map that kind of idea against the programmatic colonial strategy of First Nations linguistic erasure. And in the fourth industrial revolution, it continues as a form of almost linguicide. In the pursuit of balance, it continues and delivering on your vision, you highlighted the possibilities of representation of cultural diversities of First Nations peoples and how digital platforms and other platforms as well, including film and video games, can be seized as enablers, as forms, I would suggest, of First Nations postmodernisms. I'm always excited by that. It was then great to hear from all of you as you provided insight into the state of First Nations languages in Australia, Canada, Costa Rica, and the Philippines, and the work being engaged to provide access to language through the development of apps and other platforms. And as you point out, this represents reclamation, regeneration, revitalisation and maintenance of these languages, particularly those that are endangered. 2 points here. You have highlighted that many of these language initiatives, not all of them, and hopefully that's changing, but they have certainly remained historically largely community driven. And so there's really not attracting as much funding as they could, although I do think that's changing a bit. And certainly part of that contribution is the work that you're doing with the website as well. So as you reiterate though throughout, it is not just about speaking language, it is about the relationality and systems that interconnect First Nations knowledges and the nature of that systems thinking as well. And clearly the recognition of its significance by communities and those that are practitioners, and not that there are very many left, but hopefully this will change. The other point I want to make here is I was really pleased to hear a reference to Creole language as part of a larger raft of First Nations linguistic diversity. Creoles have evolved as a kind of lingua franca historically, and they do take account of settler relations. They're often not as well represented as they might be because they don't quite seem to fit normativized language conventions. Or they may be considered Pidgin English, for example, which places the location of innovation on the English speakers or the English interlocutors, which I think marginalizes its evolution. And contemporaneously, they are still spoken, for example, in Australia, in the Australian context, in the Torres Strait Islanders, as well as elsewhere. I think at the end of the presentation, I saw some quite heavy conceptual lifting, and you all are to be commended very much on the level of research and the careful staging of providing sediment and discussing the fourth industrial revolution and its animation. Just as a small suggestion for you to consider, you might think about maybe reordering that a little bit and moving this grounding treatment to an earlier point in the presentation. And I know that that was a walkthrough for your website. I'm understanding that as well. You've got the framing device of the vision statement. You might have used that as a little bit more of a lens. Because part of the underpinning of the fourth industrial revolution is about obviously language, but importantly the decolonizing process and the idea of really trying to reclaim enablers. So this becomes not just about reclaiming language diversity and usage, but decentering other systems to decolonize them as part of the reclamation of linguistic and knowledge sovereignty for First Nations peoples. And I mention this because you're already doing just that with your website, creating a space to know about, to talk about, and to do about. So it's an evolving resource. And you're already owning this. And I would suggest that foregrounding this even further means that you get to own it even more. So you get to mobilize those enablers that allow you to critique their lack, taking the oppressor's tools even further. I acknowledge that the website is still emergent and will remain in a constant state of becoming, and so it should. You have left me really excited by the work that you've done. I see this project as both invitation and space for activism in reclamation and standing ground. You have demonstrated a strong anchoring, very strong vision, and this very clear co-actioning in such a significant site for empowerment, refusal, celebration, and of course, reconciliation. I certainly encourage all of you to continue to work on the website, keep us all connected as a community, and foster recognition of our linguistic diversity beyond this site, in our web of connection, outside of the digital, and underscoring the urgency in continuing to engage with our elders and with our young people, and reminding us to go back to our communities and continue those situated conversations, because language always must be contextualized in generating meaning to understand what is meant. And I'd also sort of just gesture towards non-verbal language as well. And also things around something like string language, for example, as well. So it's really important to be coming to that site, but going back and encourage people to move out and continue those conversations in a located way as well. So Elisa, MJ, Moises, and Tane, extremely well done. And I am privileged to have been asked to offer my response and commentary to your work. Thank you very much for sharing.
Miigwech Niawa Gabrielle for that very powerful commentary and for fleshing out your reactions and your takeaways from this presentation. And so for this portion of the event, we are transitioning to our question and answer period. And so we invite any questions from the audience. You can paste your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom. And also we welcome commentary from the students on the different projects that you saw today and what your reactions have been to them as well. So feel free to raise your hand or to paste those comments and reactions in the chat, and we welcome that commentary from you.
And probably first to start, if there are panelists who actually want to respond to the commentators first, we can do that first. And we ask that when people are jumping in to speak, that they turn on their cameras, if that's possible. So let's go to Linton first. Oh, Linton, you're muted.
Oh, thank you so much, Carolyn. Hi, everybody. And I just really would like to give thanks and a positivity to Diego's group in presenting that song and the song that they made for us, like for our group. It was just really transformative. And like I said in the chat, I'm a researcher. I can find things. I have that orientation. I'm not creative. And this experience opened me up to like creativity, and I can appreciate the creativity. Thank you.
Miigwech for that reaction, Linton, and for expanding upon the presentation on healing through music. We do have one question in the chat now, and any group member, or actually, I will give the opportunity to Gabriella if you would like to speak to Linton's point, and if not, then we can move on to the first question in the chat.
Hola con todos. Perdón, voy a hablar en español por facilidad. Sí, nuevamente decirles muchas gracias por haber visto la presentación con mucha atención. Sin duda es muy valioso para nosotros y lastimosamente Diego y Valeria no pudieron estar aquí. Sin embargo, estoy segura de que ellos también comparten mi felicidad y les haré llegar sus buenos augurios a cada uno. Y muchas gracias, Lyndon. Sí creo que tuvimos algunas cositas que pudimos haber tal vez incluso mejorado en algunos aspectos de la presentación, pero nos agradó mucho el aspecto de compartir una parte creativa y fue haciendo esa canción. Me agradó mucho y la idea principal era hacerla en 3 idiomas, pero por cuestiones de coincidencia no pudimos hacerlo en inglés, pero la traducción sí estaba ahí abajo y me alegro que también la hayan visto. Y sí, tal cual como Brianna lo dijo, esta canción dice muchas cosas y habla básicamente de los orígenes, ¿no? Y de que independientemente de la lejanía en la que nos encontremos, hay un punto en donde nos reunimos y en este caso es esta clase. Es un bonito espacio para poder estar todos juntos independientemente de la distancia. Así que, nada, solamente muchas gracias por haber apreciado la creatividad y también haber puesto mucha atención a la presentación.
And thank you, Gabriela. I think we answered Evania's question. What was it like to create these projects with people from all over the world? There are barriers, but we share a common experience, and that experience, I think, as Indigenous people, is what guides us around the world, regardless of geographical, social, or cultural context. So I would like to answer that question that way. And I think Gabriela also helped me out on that. Thank you very much.
Miigwech, Linton, for starting us off with that question. Before we jump to it and we invite more people's feedback, I also have a follow-up question to the song that your group created, Gabriela, if you don't mind. So the question that I have is, I was wondering what inspired you from either your Indigenous heritage and your Indigenous cosmology to create this song. And for example, we hear you and Diego speak to star knowledge. So I was wondering if maybe you could speak a little bit about the elements that you drew upon to create the song. And I also noticed that you use your language as well in this song.
Ok, perfecto. Básicamente, la idea que siempre tuve antes de ingresar a este curso, tuve una idea de poder homogenizar tal vez un poquito una canción con orígenes. No sabía en qué momento podría aplicarse, pero luego creo que la vida es muy sabia y ahora estamos en este espacio en donde sin duda todos hablamos diferentes lenguajes, tanto nativos, tanto globales, hablamos diferentes idiomas. Así que me agradó mucho y me parece demasiada coincidencia que justo a nuestro grupo le haya tocado el tema de la música y la sanación. Dije que era perfecto, así que en el grupo la idea en sí era investigar un poco acerca de esta conexión directa y ahí les mencionaba a Diego y a Valeria que hagamos una canción y que esta recoja parte de lo que nosotros somos. En este caso, Valeria no pudo hacerlo, no pudo hacer esa partecita, pero ella, por ejemplo, también su idioma es español. El Diego dijo, yo puedo hacerlo en inglés, pero obviamente por un poco de logística no pudimos hacerlo en nuestros idiomas. Y yo les dije, yo lo hago en quichua. Y básicamente todos íbamos a decirlo, las 3 oraciones que son muy, muy bonitas. Y luego nadie de nosotros toca algún instrumento, pero esa no es una limitación para no hacerlo. Así que hablamos con un músico que nos ayudó con la base de la guitarra y con eso ya cada uno nos dividimos los tiempos, segundos en donde íbamos a ingresar y eso básicamente. Así que por eso lo hicimos, bueno, mi parte en quichua
Y le tengo acá y me gustaría hacer énfasis en la letra, porque esa es bastante peculiar, así que quiero ver si tengo acceso a compartir, así que lo voy a hacer, ¿ya? Y vamos a ir hablando acerca de la letrita y qué nos lleva a qué cosa, para ser un poquito más claros. Así que...
Of course, we would love that.
Así que aquí está la presentación. Ok. Un poco de tiempo.
Desde lejos venimos, desde lejos venimos las estrellas, donde nace el sol. Luz es lo que somos, luz es lo que somos.
Ya, perdón, quería hacer un poco de énfasis ahí, pero no puedo poner pausa. Por ejemplo, ahí, en donde Diego dice, desde lejos venimos, es verdad. Él es originario de México. Valeria es originaria se me fue, ¿Honduras? Me parece que es Honduras, no estoy muy segura, perdón por ese dato. Yo de Ecuador, y son pueblos demasiado opuestos, ¿ya? Entonces ahí se recopila eso. Y en el aspecto en donde dice, luz es lo que somos, no, perdón, esa es la última parte, donde dice, donde las estrellas, hacemos referencia a los orígenes, porque se supone que nuestra identidad cultural viene incluso conectada desde los astros, como por ejemplo la cultura maya y culturas así que tienen esa historia y esa conectividad. Y por eso habla donde las estrellas, donde nace el sol. Y nada más. Perdón. Ahora sí les voy a dejar que vean completo. Así que recopila estas 3 ideas principales. Y esto es en quichua, que dice, venimos desde lejos, desde las estrellas, luz es lo que somos. Y este es un extracto del Chimborazo, que es uno de los volcanes más altos del Ecuador, y un mensaje que nos gustaría compartir con ustedes, y eso básicamente es la historia que hay detrás de la presentación de esa canción.
Miigwech Gabriela, I'm not sure if there was another part that you wanted to share. I don't mean to cut you off.
Creo que solo eso es la estructura de cómo se llevó a cabo la canción.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, thank you so much, Gabby. Let's turn to another question that was asked in the question box, and this time by Marhun, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. And I believe Marhun is a secondary school teacher, and she's wondering, she has questions for the third group actually on the Indigenous Languages website. And she's wondering about the challenges that were encountered in creating the website and also whether there would be particular opportunities to connect with, for example, education departments, and especially for creating Indigenous language courses. And I also had a question for that group that's very similar to Marhan's question, and that is, did you have a chance to learn from one another from the different regions you work in about strategies for language survival and revitalization?
I think I'll go ahead. So I am MJ from the Philippines. And for the first question, I think the one who posted the question is also from the Philippines. What are the problems that you had encountered when making the LFIA? It's not much of a problem because we would say that technology has been a great help for the four of us. We would like to shout out WhatsApp, Google Slides, and Messenger for making this collaboration possible, for making and also strikingly.com for making the website possible, because one of us put out or built the site and then opened for everyone to edit it, include what we have researched, of course. And for the LFAIR, we initially wanted to highlight the impacts, both negative and positive impacts of technologies to the indigenous languages until we encountered this fourth industrial revolution. Although we've been encountering this because both of us are from the commerce, I'm from the management industry as well. And to answer that problem that we have encountered, one of which is that there are a lot of projects. It is a good thing and at the same time a bad thing, because we had a hard time on picking which of these projects concerning the revitalization of indigenous languages are actually pro the indigenous community, or that are actually supporting the indigenous community. The second line that says, will there be a partnership with the education department for making a course or subject for indigenous language or mother tongue? I cannot directly answer that partnership with the Department of Education, but what I know as a researcher and as someone who works with the indigenous communities is that there are programs from the University of the Philippines. For example, the Mariam Dictionary, Mariam, if you could check that on mariam.ph, it is actually, or the project leader is from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. So that's Assistant Professor Mario Carrion. So he works on that, he and his team works on that mariam.ph, wherein if you go to the website, you can see, or you can contribute to the dictionary. At the same time, you can also contact them and their team if you would like to add, or if you would like to input languages, these indigenous languages or your mother tongue, to the dictionary that they're developing. So that's one of the best projects, project on the dictionary that I've searched on in the Philippines. So Moises, would you like to add something from your?
Yeah, I would like to,
yes.
Hello. I would like to add something, and it is that some problems that we had was that there are not, for example, in my country specifically, there are not a lot of indigenous projects, and we don't know if the projects are linked directly with the indigenous communities, since some of them have been created by non-indigenous peoples and they don't know the indigenous perspective, you know. So the fourth industrial revolution could help the indigenous communities, but you should first ask to the indigenous people what are what are some things that they could help them, you know, because you can think that something can help indigenous peoples, but it doesn't really help them. So for example, the Chipcha keyboard is something that is really helpful, but a lot of people don't know about it, and it is a problem about the information. Sorry. And it is a problem about the information because people don't know about it. People don't know that it exists. People don't know that. So yeah, those are some problems that we could see during the development of the project. And yeah, and the second question, I don't know if we can like make this project together with the school department, because this, as MJ said, there are a lot of projects, and we would like to try working together, but we right now the project is in progress, so we are like developing the web page and we are working on it. So yeah, that's my answer.
Miigwech, MJ, and Moises for responding to these questions. And I also just want to mention that I thought it was really brilliant that you included a section on your website for people to continue contributing to this conversation on language revitalization. It really speaks to the collective effort that it takes in revitalizing languages. And we have one question that we'll open up to everyone who would like to speak to it. And that question, Linton actually started us off with. It is, what was it like to create these projects with people from all over the world? Were you struck more by the similarities of Indigenous peoples around the world, or the differences of your specific geographic, social, and cultural contexts? And I will open this question up to whomever would like to speak to it.
I'll speak to it, and it was absolutely, if I could define it, serendipitous. It was really beautiful to create this project with Jordan, who couldn't be here, as well as Daniel. And we just have, we have like a sort of a disparate, I guess, educational background, because I come from like a more business side. Daniel is on the urban studies and youth and wellness side. And Jordan is actually like a really smart math guy from the University of Philippines, Baguio. And then so like I found myself working with Jordan, and I thought I feel like an idiot compared to this guy. And so the more we got talking to each other, the more we really developed our brochure. We connected with each other, and like it grew organically. We stayed in touch the whole time, in constant contact, regardless of schedules. Like we worked around. I think maybe some of these questions might relate to like time differences, but we worked around it. It grew organically, and it was absolutely fantastic working with these fellow Indigenous scholars on this project. And I'm really happy to deliver it and be here to speak to it because they aren't unfortunately here. And I really hope I answered the question. I can't, like, I would really like to, I think that we left out, as Professor Michael and Consuelo pointed out, digital divide, global north, global south, and also access to education. That's not, it's not equal. So that's a particular focus for me in future endeavors. And thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, well, Lyndon, and also recognizing that knowledge is carried in very different ways and comes from very different situated contexts. So thank you for acknowledging. Well, I just wanted to actually add that in conversation to how you felt in relation to your peers and recognizing that you all bring different knowledges from different perspectives. Would any other student or faculty member like to speak to this question? If you'd like to take a moment to think about it, we do have a comment in the chat that I would like to read. This comment was submitted in Spanish, but I will read the translation to English. And from this individual said that it is so nice for me to listen to this music. Thanks a lot. I am a student in the Indigenous education program in York, Waban. I am very happy to hear the voices of the Indigenous peoples in South America. I am Quechua, originally from Peru. We are so happy that you could join us, and it's brilliant that you're studying at York in the Indigenous Teachers Education Program, the Waban program, which I know Susan Dion, who spoke at the beginning, is affiliated with and supports this program. Gabriela, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Sí, con mucho gusto. Me da mucho gusto que alguien que está casi muy cerca de Ecuador pudo escuchar y sentir un poco de ese calor de cercanía indígena y más que todo también hasta geográfico. Me da mucho gusto y me parece que sí, independientemente de si seamos o no de la misma línea indígena, no indígena o como cualquier persona quiera autoidentificarse, da gusto que la música sea en este momento sea ese motivo de conexión y que independientemente de el lugar o en el espacio en el que nos encontremos, siempre va a haber esta resistencia por medio de este arte que es la música, y les invito a que escuchen bastante algunos temas derivados. Yo les puse 2 temas que hablaba directamente de esta conexión en el chat, así que lo voy a poner nuevamente. También tengo un grupo musical, así que si quieren ir a escucharlo en YouTube, no hay ningún problema. Ya les pongo el nombre, solo eso.
I might speak to this. I think that what we saw, that there were so many overarching themes, but it was also so wonderful to see and explore across geographies and so many other differences, the particular manifestations of overarching themes. And I think the other thing I wanted to say was that the linguistic question is so important, right? And so one of the benefits that I think we had in this edition of the program, as opposed to last semester's, was the Spanish English interpretation services. So I really want to thank the interpretation, the interpreters and that service, and all of the resources that were provided to make that possible. So although we operated in English and Spanish primarily, colonial languages, it opened up new spaces for collaboration and cross-cultural understanding that maybe we didn't have in the first edition, given that most of the participants in this edition were in both English and Spanish speaking sort of official language cultures. So, but this represents an incredible opportunity as we go forward, incredible complexity to including more and more languages and making this program more and more multilingual. But I think we're on that path, and that was a wonderful addition for this edition. Yeah, thank you.
Miigwech, Michael. And yes, Gabriella, we would love to hear more about your music groups. If you could put them in the chat, definitely be looking into them more. I also wanted to mention, I think I just want to acknowledge the effort that it took to get a musician to be involved in this project as well, and acknowledge that contribution, which is incredible. And speaking to your point about your project, but all the other projects, particularly in this space, we see that transgression of physical location and how people can be brought together through these virtual platforms, which I think speaks to everyone's presentation. And we also see that transgression of time and how it's not linear, but that connection to ancestral knowledge, and present day knowledge and contemporary knowledge. And we see those interconnections. So we see that transgression of time.
So I'd like to actually jump in here and address Ivania's question as well. And so one of the things that I think is so fantastic about this course that really makes it rich is not only do we have this diversity of geographies and cultures, but we have this diversity of disciplines as well. So I think that that's one of the places where universities can actually connect with many Indigenous cultures is through a holistic approach to knowledge. And having a multidisciplinary context is really a powerful tool for entree into that. And that's something that really inspired me week after week, was hearing people coming from really dramatically different disciplinary contexts and bringing their particular knowledge and particular kinds of theoretical questions and particular methods to the different topics that we all explore together. So I just want to say that that's something that was a real standout for me. Okay, ever conscious of time, I just want to see if there's anybody else who wants to comment on this general question or share any other comments with the other groups before we move to our closing ceremonies.
I do.
Okay, let's go with Linton, and then I see Ruth's hand.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. And so when I first read the syllabus, and I actually did read through the whole thing. Carolyn did not leave $50 anywhere lying around. If you read the syllabus, the first article I read was Growing Up Quechua, Ethnic Identity Narrative, from Professor Hill, and I was just tickled pink that Professor Hill actually really chose to comment on our project. And this is my niece, Glory. She came. Glory's actually mestizo, half Ojibwe and half Ecuadorian, and Glory, say hi to Professor Carolyn. Hi. And sorry, bye. Young one, sorry. Okay, and so I was really, really impressed by Professor Michael's study from the first moment I read the syllabus. And I'm happy that he chose to comment on our group's project specifically. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Linton. And it was Ruth who just had her hand up as well, eh? I'm over 50, so I forget everything.
Yeah, that would be me. And I would also like to answer the question by Ivania, which is what is it like to create these projects with people all over the world. Actually, it's really been amazing, and I really enjoyed these weeks. And as I said in our sharing circle, I really offered and hearing all your stories, everyone's stories wherever they are in the world, makes me really proud of where I am as well, and makes me want to do more with the efforts of revitalizing culture, especially with the language. And also I've seen so many similarities in the indigenous peoples all around the world, especially for example, I remember the first sessions that we had, the first meetings that asked what similarities there are, and we have really seen throughout the course as well that we have had our share of unfortunate things like colonization and its effect on us, not only then but also now. But then the other similarity that came after that is our verb, is our strong desire to re-indigenize, or to go back to our roots and just show it and be ourselves and to be proud of where we came from. And that is why I'm so honored to be part of this program. And even though we had differences in time and it has been a challenge really with our group as well, because we have been working with Star in Virginia, but we are very similar in our passion to further our causes as Indigenous peoples, and that is what helped us to finish our project and to be here right now. So I'm proud of you all. Love you all, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. And let's go to Moises now.
Sí, solo quería responder a la pregunta que hizo, bueno, no me acuerdo quién fue, sobre cómo fue crear los proyectos con las diferentes personas, digamos, de diferentes partes del mundo, las diferentes culturas. Y creo que más allá de crear los proyectos, lo que personalmente más me ayudó fue escuchar las personas en las clases, porque en las clases es donde hablan todas las personas del grupo y todas las personas de las diferentes partes del mundo. En el proyecto solo habíamos 4 personas, mientras que en las clases oír las diferentes realidades de gente de Australia, de México, de Ecuador, de aquí mismo, de Costa Rica, es algo que lo enriquece mucho a uno y lo hace pensar sobre las diferentes realidades de los pueblos indígenas alrededor del mundo, y con lo cual uno se va muy enriquecido de este curso y puede tener una visión más amplia de estas realidades, y también puede contribuir a los pueblos indígenas en donde uno vive, y además compartir las experiencias desde el punto de vista como un joven indígena estudiante con los demás que estuvieron en el curso. Entonces, el proyecto fue más bien un resultado de todo lo que aprendimos durante la clase y lo que pudimos compartir y lo que nos pudo enriquecer puesto en práctica en un proyecto de 4 personas o de 3 personas, pero ya era algo que nos había marcado a nosotros y que nos había hecho pensar en cómo fue que este curso nos enriqueció y cómo podemos nosotros devolver a la sociedad de eso. Entonces creo que ese es mi aporte a la pregunta que ella había hecho.
Fantastic, Moises. Thank you so much. Okay, any other final comments before we move to our closing?
I was going to type it in the chat, but maybe I'll just mention it here. And I see MJ unmuted, but I just want to say miigwech and niawagoa to everyone for sharing your reflections on the program. It really means so much to everyone who's taken part in organizing it, that our intentions have been realized. Miigwech, niawagoa, and MJ. We'll give you the last word.
Thank you so much. Salamat. I'm actually out of words, and I was really contemplating a while ago on about talking or not, but I just want to flaunt my attire that I borrowed from my Lola, so, and my background. This is what or how this program has impacted or affected me. It has awakened something within that is difficult to explain, but somehow in actions and even in the learnings that I shared with several Indigenous peoples across the world, I'm very much or beyond thankful for the opportunity given to us to share in a wider space, in a wider perspective, the culture and the knowledge system that we actually carry within us. From the fibers of this fabrics that I have at my background and the fabrics that I'm wearing right now, I can feel the warmth of these lessons and even the legacies that was left to us by our ancestors. More of the similarities that I found out is on how we have been fighting and how we have been carrying the warrior within us, how we have been trying to tell the world that, hey, we exist and we still wanted to exist because we have something good to share and we have it in our hearts. We carry what our ancestors or forefathers have left to us, and we are trying to unravel what is there or what is still there or what is still out there. And thank you so much for this time. For everyone, I cannot name you individually, but thank you so much for this time and this opportunity. From the Philippines and from Benguet, gawi-gawi sa egsapat ako, gawi-gawi sa egsapat ako, and mabuhay.
Fantastic, MJ. Beautiful words. Okay, we are going to turn to our closing muckety muck, as I like to say. And that is Helen Balderrama, who's really the heart of this program, who's the Associate Director of York International. So Helen has 20 years working in the international education cooperation in Africa, the Americas, Asia, Europe, and through her work with UNESCO and the Asia Europe Foundation and the university sector in Canada. And in her current job at York International, she facilitates and shepherds the university's global engagement and supports York students in participating in global learning opportunities through exchanges such as this one. So Helen, let's turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Caroline, and thank you so much to the presenters, to the students, and to the faculty members and commentators that we all heard just now. My name is Helen Balderrama, as Caroline had mentioned, and I am from York International, one of the lucky co-organizers of this unique space for dialogue and collaboration for our Indigenous students. Locating myself, I wanted to share that I am a settler, born and raised in the Philippines, and now I call Canada home. I now have the great pleasure on behalf of the organizing team to share our sincerest thanks to individual students, faculty mentors, facilitators, and knowledge keepers and elders, staff, and international partners who have paved the way and made this program possible. And I know we have a slide because I want to actually mention one by one the people who are involved. I apologize in advance if I mispronounce some of your names. To our students, Alice Billiet, Alisa Argueta Hinkson, Amy House, Autumn Apple, Blanca Martina Bautista Zapata, Daily Valeria Toval Diaz, Daniel Podnor, Diego Ivan Regalado Hernandez, Donna Maris Bulog, Emma Lichko, Gabriela Aguilar, Jordan Pillay, Julian Christian, Julian Bakagan, Lyndon Akiwenzi, Maria Jesusa Leonardo Gambulao, Moises Salguero Morales, Ruth Daryl Pugong, Star Nadine Lafford, Tane Martin, Victor Daniel Navarro Zapata, Virginia Barter, Jimena Matias Mercado. To our faculty facilitators, Professor Consuelo Fernandez Salvador, Professor Diana Segura Soho, Professor and Dean Leah Abayao, Professor Gabriel Fletcher, Dr. Jesse Tissel, Professor Leticia Neria, Professor Michael Hill. To our guest speakers, knowledge keepers, and elders who joined us and shared their time, Amy Desjardins, Bonita Lawrence, Colin Nicholas, Deb McGregor, Helen Knott, Jonathan Rango, Jody Sator, Jordan Abel, Kenzie Allen, Melinda Kennedy. To our interpreters from Glendon College, Michael Hill mentioned the importance of the language and paving the way for this dialogue through English and Spanish translators. To the language marketplace who's helping us tonight, our international partners, Deakin University, Tecnológico de Costa Rica, Tecnológico de Monterrey, University of New South Wales, University of the Philippines, Baguio, Universidad San Francisco de Quito. To our internal partners at York University, Dr. Lily Cho from the Liberal Arts and Professional Studies, who's the Associate Dean, Global Engagement, and Katie Gribbons, Study Abroad Coordinator. To Randy Pitanakwat from the Center of Indigenous Student Services, York International colleagues, particularly Mary Rose Tala and Brianna Berry, who is also co-instructor of the program. And finally, to Dr. and Professor Caroline Podruchny. Without your support, your personal commitment in championing this program, this would not have been possible. Thank you so much. I'm here just representing the work of the team and of the students and all of you.
Thank you so much, Helen. That was wonderful, and I'm so glad that you read everybody's name. So if we could go to our final slide, we have a gift for everybody, a parting gift, and that is a closing poem by one of our students, Ruth Pugong, so who you've heard from already. And just to remind you that Ruth is a Kile ethno-linguistic group from Asapulo, who is Ifuago, and Ilocanos from Isabela in the Philippines. And she's a fourth-year Bachelor of Science and Management Economics student at the University of the Philippines, Baguio, and a warm and energetic advocate for Indigenous culture, poetry, and the arts. Ruth.
Hello. So again, my poem is entitled Wada Isudya, which is Kelei for we are here, and indeed we are here and we exist, and we're shouting it out to the world. So here is the poem that I dedicate to all of you. The words that come before all else is your presence here. It will always stay even after you leave, and will always be so clear. Every arpeggio on the guitar, the beats of the drums, the features on all our lands, and the wind as it hums will stay, will linger, and nobody will topple as we forge on for ourselves and for our people. Now let us add more voices to the thundering cry for the world we want in the depths to the sky. Seiko, kayagud ni ageo ni naskumong. See, we are all connected from now on. Consented hugs all around, and let our indigenous voices and colors fly. Nakumek miguech iyaman, wekte basra, never goodbye. Thank you. So some of the words here are from the indigenous languages, and from the phrases that I've frequently heard from my classmates here. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, everybody. So never goodbye.
And I just want to make, sorry, Lyndon. I just want to make a brief announcement. So this is the end of our event, and I'll just ask all the panelists and faculty members to stay behind for a quick group photo.